is the road to the promised land. It's a recommended book. And we will read it from Pali to Pali as long as it takes. Share the broadcast. Thank you so much again. A special thanks goes to Yomi Totu. This is procured and sent to Mayegun's Diary Politico for the general use or general reading and history that a lot of us will love, and some of us will likely question a lot of things that we have heard, been told here and there. So this is a piece of a literary work, right, that tells more the story of the people forced together in a single contraption when they have a lot, so much not in common. And according to this author, Dele Ogun, said you can't understand the culture of any country without knowing its history. That's so true. You can't explain the politics without knowing the history. And he said that is from William Hague, former British secretary. Share this broadcast. Nigeria, a fatherless people. Motide. Thank you very much. I think I have a copy of this. If you look at the side camera, that smaller camera, I think we do have this map, which we believe is the map that really explains or close to, a map that shows the representation of every ethnic, nationalities, and tribes in Nigeria. Here you see down there, right? I'm going to put it on the screen. I think I have a copy here, if you don't mind. So good morning to you once again, good afternoon to you, and good evening to you from wherever you are joining me from. It is Mayegun's brunch time live. And we are just about to go into some historical trance now. And this is the kind of broadcast that you can listen to and still do other things. For example, if you are driving, you do not need to see the video. If you are walking, all you have to do is to put the, put your earpiece on, and then you can listen to this as cool as possible, because I will be reading. Well, a lot of us have been trying to see, to have an opportunity, okay, to be able to take a look into the past while we are looking for answers for our dilemma of today, before we, to decide where we will end in the future. Kind of history matters. And a lot of us I believe, must have seen this book, right? So a lot I've heard about it. And this is my own first time that I'm actually, having it in my hands. So whatever I'm going to kind of see from this book, like many of you, it is going to be my first time. However, like I said, it is pure reading. Okay. And for those who recommended this book, especially for Larry, my dear brother, sir, This book also sort of explains, from what I have heard, though, explains the, uh, you know, the bit by bit of the existence of everybody in that contraption called Nigeria today. In a way, you'll be able to understand why some tribes or ethnic nationalities, they find commoners in themselves beyond just their languages. I'm talking about due to their proximity, trade, and the rest of that, they ended up becoming just almost one. Kind of, right? Okay. According to this author, he said here, Nigeria's 371 ethnic groups. And I would love to kind of read all of them out, but we can come back to that later. That's some piece of information there, okay? Where they are and all. So let's start with the introduction. So this is a quote. During the negotiation for the independence of Nigeria, the view of the Secretary of State at that time, with which I agreed, was that in Nigeria, we should attempt to put together a large and powerful state with ample material resources, which would play a leading part in the affairs of the continent and the world. And this was from Sir Peter Smithers. Now let's read. Every once in a while, a book comes along that changes our understanding of the world in which we live. The turnaround book for me was Professor Jared Diamond's Gun, Germs, and Steel, A Short History of Everybody. It explained comprehensively and without any of the gaps in logic so often left by alternative religious and geneticists narratives, the pattern of human development that we see across the world today. Diamond's central argument is that the underdevelopment of the southern hemisphere and the relative overdevelopment of the northern hemisphere is neither the result of God's will, as suggested by many believers, nor a consequence of genetic differences. It is, Diamond says, the product of differences in geographical and climatic conditions. It was the realization gained from this book that the explanation for seemingly inexplainable human social conditions may not be beyond human understanding that led me to believe that there might equally be an explanation for the mystery that is Nigeria, a country of which so much is heard but about which so little is understood. This work was further inspired and provoked by an admonition in the preface to another book. This one, written by one of my own people, The History of the Yoruba by the Reverend Samuel Johnson, in quotes. Educated natives of Yoruba are well acquainted with the history of England, with that of Rome and Greece, but of the history of their own country, they know nothing whatever. This reproach, it is one of the author's objects to remove. So the word struck home and struck deep at the time Johnson wrote them. I'll take that again, sorry. According to this author, said the word struck home and struck deep. At the time Johnson wrote them in 1897, his country was Yoruba. By the time the book first saw the light of the day in 1921, upon first publication, the Yoruba people, though not all of them, had been amalgamated with 370 other ethnic groups to become Nigeria. Being the land of my birth and of my formative years, the inquiry which Johnson's words set off was more than purely intellectual. Growing up and then living in England, but forever looking back, I was keen to understand why the evil of the slave trade had afflicted the land as it did. I then wanted to understand why colonization followed so closely upon slavery and its abolition. Above all, I wanted to know the answer to the question often asked of me by the new generation of young Nigerians. What was there before Nigeria? Ajasa Street in Onikon, Lagos, was the location of the family home at the time of my birth in 1962. Situated behind the old Federal Parliament building in what is now Tafawa Balewa Square. The first air that I took in was heavy with the politics of newly independent country. My father, a former clerk in the colonial service, was one of the many former colonial subjects who came to the United Kingdom in the early 1960s to pursue further studies. He and others of his type were readying themselves for the new opportunities and responsibilities that independence promised. I wanted to understand the country's short journey from a colony status on the 1st of January 1900 to independence on the 1st of October 1960, and the effect of this period of tutelage upon the people and their politics. I only recently became aware that before he became premier of the western region of Nigeria, our next door neighbor at number 20 Ajasa Street was Samuel Ladoke Akintola, who plays a major part in Nigeria's post-independence story, and specifically in the bloody turmoil that gripped that region from 1962 until the first military coup of January 1966. When I was 7 years old, my parents, who were then living in the UK, sent me to join the family and to be educated like the white man's children. The Biafran War tragedy was just nearing its end at the time of my arrival. Each night we watched the unfolding tragedy with images of death and famine on the BBC 9 o'clock news without any inkling that I would one day become married to one of those young Biafran girls. The initial resistance to the idea from mothers sparked an interest into the origins of the antipathy between my wife's Igbo people and my own Yoruba people, and into the Biafran story. As an extension of this, I wanted to get to the bottom of the rivalry between the Nigerians of the South, chiefly the Igbos, and the Yorubas on the one side, and the Nigerians of the North, principally the Hausas and the Fulani, on the other side. Above all, I wanted to understand the reason for the state of underdevelopment which plagued the country, even as it was so blessed with human and material resources. It was a habit of mine. It was a habit of mine on the occasional return trips to my village in the Yoruba heartland to sit in on the traditional family meetings and all male assembly convened in the parlor of the oldest living male, at which village affairs and family disputes deliberated upon as in a court of law. I recall how on one occasion, after a party to one dispute had made one too many appeals to Jesus Christ to be his witness as to the truth of what he was saying, my father's elder brother, Uncle Akinbeyi, suddenly exclaimed Èwo ni Jésù Kristi yìí tí ìwọ ń pè? Ṣé Òkìtìpupa ni wọ́n bí sí ni? This translates to, who is this Jesus Christ that you keep calling? Was he born in Okitipupa? This incident stirred my curiosity as to the drivers of the foreign religious influences on my people. It emerged in the course of the research that a significant number of the colonial officers had been sons of clergymen. An interesting fact in itself, which becomes all the more significant because one of the key challenges to the authority of the sons came from the interest in Western education, which the fathers had stimulated in the natives in the course of their evangelism. My research on the arrival of Christianity in Nigeria was to lead me to the realization that the secondary school which I attended in London, Highbury Grove Boys Secondary School in Highbury, Hillington, stood on land which had belonged to the Church Missionary Society, CMS, which in 1830s had spearheaded the push of Christianity into what was to become Nigeria. The first CMS training college had been opened in Highbury in 1825 as the Highbury Missionary College. The Highbury Center, formerly the Foreign Mission Club, which was established in 1893 to provide accommodation to missionaries and Christian ministers in training, is still situated at Aberdeen Park, which backs onto the old school complex. I recall how, as schoolboys, we used to see the nuns in their habits, the priests in their dog collars, and various other pious-looking people crisscrossing from Aberdeen Park to Highbury Fields without ever appreciating the significance of the location of Christianity in Africa. With some other members of my family being Muslims, and with the sound of the daily call to prayer in the vicinity of Omididun Street, Isaleko, downtown Lagos. During the 1 year that I lived there with relatives, having imprinted in itself on my memory, I wanted an understanding of how this faith from Arabia had first entered and then spread its reach across Nigeria. Above all, I was curious to discover how the fault line between the two faiths came run through the center of the country so perfectly horizontally. My reflection on all these issues began in earnest in the course of my attendance at the Nigerian Law School in Victoria Island, Lagos. During the 1985-1986 academic year, following my call to the English bar, this was a period of transition for the country. The military regime of General Muhammadu Buhari and Major Tunde Idiagbon had just been overthrown in August 1985, and General Ibrahim Babangida had taken over. I wanted to understand why democracy had failed so badly in Nigeria, and also the nature and origins of military rule in the country. I'll take a tea break because that's a bit of a long read, you will say. And to every one of you who is still here or stumbling on this is us reading A Fatherless People, a piece of work done by Dele. And this is just the introduction to the real work from what motivated the writer, the publisher, to go deeper into what we are about to see as the history, our history, okay, for clarity, yeah? So thank you so much once again for joining me. So let us continue. In fact, I'm going to put on, just to be sure that everything is indeed, you need to let me know if I am not reading too fast for you, okay? Because that's so important. It's like listening to a radio podcast, like it's just like must be rhythmic. If you want me to put a sound, I can actually get one up. I'm talking about like in sound, like that's gonna be like a, anyway, you need to share the broadcast as well. All right, let's see. Let's see if that does make any you would I can leave a sort of acoustic tune like that behind while I read. So I'm going to read, and you're going to tell me like if it is please remove it. Yeah, right? Hmm? Thank you so much for that. Azan Miga. Somebody says here. Let me put that up quickly. Mr. Mayegu is very political. Our orphans looking for your helping. In this situation we are, half of bread is not okay. I'm trying to understand this. Okay. Muhammad. Okay. You know something there is this, Muhammad. You have to do a bit of the background check. It is like uh, excuse me. Tell me please if you think that sound is kind of alright like that, or it should be like that. You know. So you can find the book online. I believe you can find it on Amazon. I do not know if you can find this on Amazon, just like any book or any company now. Or this was ordered today and it got delivered here in Scotland. Okay, but let's continue. We only have just maybe another, let's say, 2 hours, by the way, to get through this, and we are still at introduction. So please let me know if the sound should be lower, right? So sorry, I have to be asking because I prefer doing this. So you're the ones who are going to be consuming this, okay? So it can just be like a solo sound, background sound like that. And I'm not even trying to sleep. Let's try another sound. How is that? That's okay, let's leave it at the other sound. Okay. So thank you very much. The sound has been reduced. Let me know if it is perfect for you. Continue. And the moment you all feel like that's perfect, I can mute the sound and you won't hear it. But whenever we are reading, the stage we leave it is going to be where it's going to stay at. Okay. And it will actually be interesting. So let me read. And you now tell me, all right, if you think it is probably right and it's just coming from the ground loud. And also, please let me know if I am reading too fast. Normally, I not to read too fast. Sometimes I may just please let me know that too. So let's continue. From the perspective of the publisher, a fatherless people, a fatherless people. Let's continue. Somebody said that the sound is breaking. No, it's not. It is actually programmed that way. Up, down, and up, but it's just in there. And you'll be hearing it, but you won't be able to really pass it. But when I read, they just rhyme at some point. Okay. So thank you so much for joining me. As you are joining, you should share it. This is Mayegun, sharing with us this, a fatherless people by Dele, a piece of art, a piece of that we believe give us insight into more or less like who we are than the dead one they are foisting on us today. Remember that. In November 1995, the public hanging of the Ogun activist, poet, and playwright Ken Saro-Wiwa was carried out. The hanging was at the insistence of General Sani Abacha in contemptuous disregard of international pleas, clemency. The oil deposit in Sarawiwa's Niger Delta region is what Nigeria's modern wealth is built upon, and the UK's Shell Petroleum PLC is the main is the main foreign oil operator region. I wanted to understand the needs of the country. The colonization of one people by another is engendered and sustained by complexes of superiority and inferiority. Like many myths, once such complexes have taken hold of human consciousness, it requires superhuman effort for them to be dislodged as intellectuals and historians begin to construct works of apparent reason upon these often dubious foundations. Following passage from the memoirs of Sir Brian Sherwood Smith, last British governor of northern Nigeria, is a case in point. In quotes, Sherwood wrote, talking about the days when the ritual consumption of human flesh was a part of their daily life. Food was then desperately scarce, and the maintenance of the aged and infirm who could no longer hunt, farm, was more than the community contrived, except for the few whose acquaintance with the supernatural made them valuable. The aged, it was conveniently believed, were prone to possessions by evil spirits, which would prey upon their fellows. Such as these, once identified, were put to the sacrifice and consumed. Over venturesome travelers from other parts and the victims of intertribal warfare met a like fate. In fact, here, where we were sitting, they told me, was the site of the sacrificial altar. As I displayed interest, the old men, their tongues loosened by palm wine, began to describe in grisly detail exactly how these things had been staged. The persons of the condemned were secured, head downward, between two upright stakes, their limbs spread eagled. Beneath them burnt a slow, smoky fire. Around in anticipation squatted the elders, each with his back against an upright slab, or in the position to which his status entitled him. As life passed, boiling palm oil was introduced into a book. I had heard enough. The colonial governor's account of events that were supposed to have taken place in the lifetime of my grandfather made me uncomfortable. It left me wondering how much of this was true, rather than the product of a myth and literary license. In today's parlance, fake news. The instinctive skepticism that I felt over the account was reinforced by a documentary program that I watched in England, which featured an upside-down crucifixion during the time of the Druids in Celtic Britain, which bore a striking resemblance to the method of ritual sacrifice that Mr. Sherwood Smith was attributing to Nigeria. Yet, never a man of Sherwood Smith's experience in Nigeria wrote in his memoirs could not be lightly dismissed. This memoir is published in 1969 as the Biafra War drew to a close. They have been amongst the leading reference materials for many commentaries at the time on the causes of that bloody conflict, in which over 2 million are said to have died from a combination of machetes, bullets, bombs, and starvation. All the same, I had my own experiences to draw upon, having been raised in the village by my grandmother during my early years with the extended influence on Akinbenyi and other relations. While I could accept that there would sometimes be the odd character or two whose habit was always to drink okogoro excess, I also knew that persons of such disposition were never known to be custodians of reliable communal history. More than anything else, it was Sherwood Smith's improbable tale, eh, though solemnly told, of cannibalism and the eating of the aged in the days when the ritual consumption of human flesh was a part of their daily life, that steered me into these issues. See, it would be naive to deny that in times of war, native